Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for your patience. Turns out that Herman is in a kind of high security place and it wouldn't allow our software to work. So instead, he's joining you by phone. So guys, I think you know me, Carol Kauffman, the founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David. And I am here with Herman Herrera, who is the US CEO of Egon Zehnder. And Herman, why don't we begin with you just sharing with everyone a bit about what Egon Zehnder is about and your role, and then we'll just explore some of the issues you're seeing now with the many CEOs you're working with.
Thank you, Carol, for having me, and sorry about the tech mishap. But in short, Egon Zehnder is one of the largest and leadership advisory firms in the world. And what we do, our purpose is leadership for a better world. And we do that through helping leaders be the best leaders they can be and helping companies make the best leadership decisions. So practically, what does that mean? We are involved in governance, helping recruit external independent directors, helping recruit executives, and working with succession. So that's in short what we do as a firm. And I'm Herman Herrera. I lead our U.S. practice, which is the largest market we have in the world.
So the first thing I'd love to do, so first of all, guys, those of you who are on, what I'd love for you to do is be super active participants and ask questions, because Herman, how many CEOs does Egon Zehnder place a year, do you think?
So in a typical year globally, it's probably like 200, 300. In the US, we do about 1,000 searches a year. And I would say about 15, 20% of those are CEOs.
Okay, so guys, Herman not only is a CEO, knows a lot of CEO, has placed a lot of CEOs, has really done a lot of CEO succession, what you do to kind of pick a CEO out of a crop. So Herman, why don't you start out by sharing with us what you look for when you are looking for a CEO succession candidate? What makes someone, what are the real skills and capacities that you are looking for, with the idea that that's also what we as coaches want to help develop?
Well, that's a very tricky question today, because if I had a couple of words to summarize what we're looking for today, I would have to respond, I don't know, or it depends. The market has been so volatile. The number of stakeholders have increased so much. In the past, and in the recent past, when we looked for a CEO, we were looking for somebody that had the experience to deal with whatever situation the company was going through, or whatever market condition we were in, or whatever function was critical for that company. So past experience was kind of a predictor of future performance. Now, the market has become so volatile, and you have different stakeholders, like investors, analysts, the communities, social media, interest groups, activists, the environment. I mean, everybody is an activist or a stakeholder, and they become a lot more active. So what we're looking for now is executives that are more on the self-reflective side, that are comfortable not having the answer, and that understand that in order to deal with the changing environment, they have to change themselves. So it's a completely different approach to identifying the ideal CEOs of today than we used to do in the very recent past.
So that's great. So guys, that is like so perfect for us as coaches to hear from Herman on this, that we are really looking for identifying the agile leader who's comfortable, reflective. And these are all things that coaching obviously can support and help like a ton. So let let me see. So Herman, what are you seeing now? So one thing, guys, that's really interesting. When I first got, so I'm half-time at Egon Zehnder. And when I first heard about them and they said they wanted to make a positive difference in the world and all that kind of stuff, I was a touch cynical. And then now that I've been there a couple of years, they really mean it. Like if they have two candidates that are kind of equal, or one's a little not quite as good as the other, but that person has good values, that's the person that they will put forward and develop. But one of the things Egon Zehnder has done is created some IP around potential. So Herman, you're saying really we've gone from what experience you have to what's your potential and hiring for that. And wondering if you could talk about that a little bit with us.
Yeah, and that was an interesting endeavor we that took us a few years, because when we were trying to identify potential and the potential of senior executives, I mean, we looked at everything that was available, and the best thing we could do was the 9 box, which was really very subjective. So we worked with academia and our experience and developed a model that has 4 criteria. I mean, one of them is curiosity. So your ability to be open to learning and developing yourself. Second is determination, which is the resilience to work through things even in uncertain and difficult situations.
Mm.
The third is engagement, which is how you bring others along. It's not about yourself; it's about bringing others. And then finally, it's about insight. How do you really connect the dots, not only in the past but in the future? So it's a pretty robust model that we use in all of our assessments of senior leaders to help identify not only the potential to develop, but also how we can, through coaching, through development, help these people become the best leaders they can be.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see as the biggest derailers in CEOs now with an eye to, us as coaches, what we can be looking for?
It's fear. So
Hmm.
when dealing with senior executives who've grown by being problem solvers, by having the answer, by being the most intelligent, by telling others what to do, uh, opening up and admitting that you don't know, or that this is a situation or a time you haven't seen, doesn't come natural to them. So the fear, their tendency to protect their reputation or protect their status or their title, and project something that they probably don't necessarily have, but that's what they think people expect them to know or have. I mean, that's the biggest drawback that I see in senior executives today.
Hmm. So we have an interesting question here from, I don't know how to say your name, forgive me, Beate, Trust. And the question is, how does the workforce usually relate to these new type of CEOs? How are people responding to them?
So that's a very good question, because the response for people that have started experimenting and demonstrating a lot more self-awareness and more vulnerability has been incredibly positive. So it's actually a relief to some of these executives how welcoming, how open, how appreciative the rest of the teams are of them not having to come across as the command and control, the know-it-all, the boss, the CEO. That actually that feedback loop has been positive and has encouraged people to take more risk and to be more like open. So it's a good question, because some of them have fear, and then the fear kind of starts dissipating once they start experiencing and seeing the feedback. So for the most part, it's very positive. It's very encouraging.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. It's sort of iterative. And someone, Deb, she mentioned, Deb, I've lost you here, so I don't see your last name. But yes, Deborah Huskan, who's a PCC, she says, as you describe the kinds of qualities we're looking for, it seems to me these are qualities that we as coaches need to have to be able to recognize and help develop them in our clients. I think that's very insightful. Um,
Yeah.
and so, Herman, so you do some coaching as well. You at times are coaching CEOs as well as being one. Um, what do you think is really helpful advice for our coaches who are coaching C-levels and senior level leaders?
So, I mean, it's going to be hard to give some insights to experts in the field. Uh, I mean, my reflection is that I would encourage everyone to reach out um, and be more proactive in helping people identify the opportunities that they have to develop and how coaches can unlock them. Like today, if I look at boards or CEOs, they're starting to realize that before they can be mentors or coaches to their colleagues and the people in the executive team, they have to work on themselves, and they don't know how to do that. And it's hard for them to be open to asking for help or asking for coaching. When you're a board member of a large company, you're expected to be coaching others, not to be coached. So it's the first time that they're realizing that they could use help themselves. So my advice to coaches these days is be be bold and reach out and get referrals and get introductions, because there's a lot of directors in large companies that need you now more than ever, but they're not asking for help. So the opportunity is huge, and the value one can create these days is incredible.
So you're talking about
I don't know if I'm
coaching.
answering the question directly, but that would be the advice I would do is try to reach out to people that can use the help and are not asking for it.
Yeah, which is sort of a little tricky to do, but you're saying particularly to the population that really could use some support now are members of boards. And a lot of our people
Yes.
are thought leaders. So my suggestion is to see what kind of blogs you might write, or how might you do a small research experiment where you're interviewing a few people on a boards, do that, through and with the Institute, to sort of start finding a way to reach out and connect to them. Um, the other thing is, someone asked a really good question, which is how many of the people out there have what it takes to be a CEO? And I'll share a quick Linda Hill recently did a survey of from Harvard Business School of 1,500 executives, and was asking how much do you believe that these sort of new skills of wisdom and self-reflection and personal development are key? And 75% they said they were key. But then when they were asked, well, how many out there do you think can be leaders like that? It was under 50%. So there is this real gap of how to sort of be developing these qualities in people. But Herman, we were talking about boards earlier, and one of the things, the challenges, is that CEO development, we now know what's needed, and CEOs are seeing it. In the Egon Zehnder survey of 1,000 CEOs, 90% said they strongly agreed that personal development was necessary for organizational development. But 3 years earlier, only like 20-something, 26-something% thought that. So that's a real shift. But when boards are weighing in, they're much more old school. So I wonder if you could talk about some of the resistance that we're seeing to what to us seems obvious. Like, of course, you need leaders like this. But what are you seeing, and what can be helpful for coaching CEOs facing that kind of resistance?
I think we're a couple of years behind of what we were with the CEOs, right? So if you would survey boards today, probably 26% would say that they need further development. But in a year, you're going to get 90% of them to admit or recognize that they need further development. So I do think that it's an older generation where this was not needed. But these are highly accomplished executives. They're highly intelligent, and they're not and they're facing the pressure from all the stakeholders we talked earlier. So it's not going to be a long time until they realize that in order to be successful, they need to continue to develop themselves. The challenge is that in the past, they were expected to be mentoring and coaching the CEOs and other executives themselves, and now they have to work on themselves. So they're going to have less time for others. And that's where I think it's the opportunity for the coaches is to help directors and help overcome or compensate for the time directors don't have to coach others. But they're
Mhm.
coming around. I mean, some of them are going to retire, some of them are going to be resisting, but with turnover and time, I think you're going to get them on board as well.
Yeah. So I have a request out there. Raphael, you just posted something about Hubert, who posted something about boomerang CEOs. Do you want to kind of do a quick comment in the chat to tell us a little bit about that? And basically, we'd just see if we can respond to it. It's interesting. I was doing.
What I can say, Carol, is that boomerang CEOs are in it for a surprise because they were brought back because they had a good run when they were first
Right.
time CEOs in a completely different market. So unless they are self-aware, unless they're adaptive, unless they're relational, they're going to be in for a surprise. And I would bet that 50-50, there's a 50-50 chance boomerang CEOs are going to succeed in this market. And I don't know if that's where the question was coming from, but I think it's going to be very hard for boomerang CEOs unless they're very special and they've been able to evolve significantly.
Yeah, I think that's completely true especially because in the past few years we've had the pandemic, we've had the war, we've had George Floyd, we've had so many things, and the expectations are really very different as the population shifts and what they're looking for. So,
Yeah.
what else is top of mind for you in thinking about the challenges CEOs are facing?
I mean, these are the main points, but
Oh dear, we lost Herman. Hopefully he will come back.
for CEOs.
There you are again. We lost you for a second,
What?
Mon. We lost you for a second. No,
Sorry.
just start your sentence again.
No, what I'm saying is that one of the biggest challenges for CEOs today is succession, because just as they're trying to develop themselves, I mean, a lot of the people that are in leadership positions within their companies grew up in a different time and different model, and they have to be developed and coached as well. So there's no obvious successors, and the way to develop successors is changing as they're changing themselves as CEOs. So that's the biggest challenge that we're seeing in the market today.
That there's so much change and what people are looking for is so different. How do we kind of adjust their development?
Their development to be ready for the next roles within the company or out in the market. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but today, two CEOs were fired, right? The CEO of VF was fired, the CEO of Vodafone was fired, and
No, I did not.
The announcement said that they were fired because of bad performance. And my question is, I mean, is that the CEO's responsibility themselves? I mean, are the board using them as a scapegoat because the board didn't have clarity on the strategy on how to support the changing environment, or is the pressure coming downhill? I don't know. But it's just interesting that we're seeing so much rotation and blaming the CEOs for the lack of performance when them alone can't carry the whole thing, and the board has to play a role in it as well. So.
Yeah, and that a couple of people have really talked about how it is lonely at the top, and nothing is lonelier than all of a sudden being the scapegoat for your company. And I remember in your the CEO survey. So guys, there's a great link on the CEO survey that Egon Zehnder did last year. And Herman, maybe you remember the statistics better than I do, but something like this. You did a survey of, I think, 200 something companies, and of those, 40 something % had 3 CEOs over the last 10 years. Okay. And then in that group, 40% of them were emergency departures. So this really, what you're seeing now really connects to that you've got these, in addition to everything else, you've got this rapid changes in what is needed. What do you think can help the CEOs become more resilient and more able to? It seems to me they have to sort of survive pressures that would kind of crush an ordinary person.
Yeah, and again, that's a skill too, right? I mean, a lot of these pressures are complex, and they don't have an answer. So if you try to respond with an answer, or try to respond, "I've got this," or "I know how to do this," I think you're going to be in for a surprise. So how to embrace the differences, how to embrace all the pressures, and respond with things that you can do, but also transparently with the things you can't do or you can't influence in the short term. But everything that we're talking about, all the stakeholder pressures that companies are getting, because it's not just the CEOs, it's the boards, it's everyone, are very complex, and they don't have short-term solutions. So knowing how to manage those is what's going to take us to, or CEOs to succeed in the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have an interesting question here. We may not know the answer, but it'd be an interesting guess. So Greg Paulson has just said, has anyone done a careful study on why CEOs are fired? What's your guess, Herman?
So, well, I mean, again, the ones we're seeing more recently is for lack of performance, and performance is not individual performance, it's stock performance, it's company performance.
Yeah.
So that's the primary reason CEOs are being fired today. And then the question I posed earlier is it the CEO's fault? I mean, what role did the board play? What role did the industry play? What role did many things play? But you need to have a scapegoat, or you need to have a throat to choke, and the CEO is the easiest, right? So for me, the most recent CEO firings have been for company performance. I haven't done a serious study, right? So this is just my guesstimate based on my experience, talking to boards and CEOs every day. Again, that's not what is published in the newspapers, but I mean, everybody's retired that took early retirement or negotiated a package,
More
have
time with your
family
family.
issues.
More time with your
Yeah,
family.
where they thought about life differently during the pandemic. I mean, we're going to see a lot of those, but I expect more of those to come soon.
Yeah. And I mean, in the Egon Zehnder survey, one of the things they said was 90% of the people said they are now in the middle of these divergent voices where nobody's agreeing with each other, everybody's making demands. And then on one hand, there's all these social pressures for, climate change and being socially responsible. But just like you said, if that comes at the expense of the numbers, they're out the door. So I think one of the conclusions that I'm really taking from your conversation is just, again, how important it is to try to support these people, because it's like a riptide. I mean, that's what it's looking like to me.
Yes.
So then, a comment on that, and then another question. Did you want to make a comment on that before I ask the next question that we got from someone? So the riptide.
No, I mean, I agree. I agree with you, and that's what I said earlier. I mean, there's so many additional stakeholders, and they become a lot more. They become louder and more active. Even passive investors have now become active, right? I mean, if you take a look at the large asset managers that have follow the Fortune 500, the S&P 500. I mean, they have to have investments in the Fortune 500 companies because that's what their indexes require them to. In the past, they just kept them. Now they're becoming more active and expecting things of the companies and the CEO. So the pressures is a perfect storm.
Hmm.
which should be music to the ears of coaches, because all of these people are going to need more coaching.
Yeah. And also, one of the things I've been working on with a number of my CEOs is how do they become better board influencers, and how do they develop. So, what I'm seeing in particular is, back to the emotional intelligence of the CEOs and their capacity to be curious. That a lot of times, what I've been talking about them is how to understand the motivations of each of their stakeholder groups and see what's driving them. Who wants power? What is it fear? What is it FOMO? What is it they just want to make an impact? How to understand those and then work on their influencing skills. So that's what I've been doing with a lot of my CEOs lately. But there was one about, because I didn't know this statistic until recently, and I don't actually know the exact statistic, but someone said, what trends are you seeing with internal CEO promotions versus external CEO hires? And I know I was surprised to find out that most are internal. Is that right?
Yes, and the rule of thumb is that when you need a big change, or there needs to be a big shift in strategy or a transformation, or there's a crisis, it usually goes to an outside CEO. When it's about growth and steady state, it's usually internal. But that
Hmm.
was in the past. I think that going forward, we're going to be seeing more internal, and that's why development has become so important, and that's because why all of these characteristics that we're identifying as the key to be a successful CEO have to be embedded in the development programs of all of these companies. But my prediction is that we're going to be seeing more internally developed candidates than bringing from the outside in the future.
So, in your experience, when an inside C-level person or executive person in the executive committee becomes the CEO, what function are they usually coming from? Is CFOs becoming it? CMOs? What's the general tendency on who tends to be elevated?
Yeah, so it really depends on the situation of the company, what they need. More often than not, when it's a company that is a matrix, it's a business unit presidents or the big regional presidents, or people that have led big P&Ls. So it's usually the business side. When
Hmm.
it's functional, if there's a crisis, or they're going through an IPO, or there's a merger, finance, and then in others it's the commercial, the head of sales or marketing. But it's usually more the P&L
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
CFO when there's a capital structure issue.
Okay. And John Olusola. Oh, I'm so terrible with names, guys. I'm sorry. How long does it take an average CEO to adjust to the executive team and the workers? Um, what's your sense of that, Herman?
I mean, it varies situation by situation, and it depends if the person is internal or comes from the outside.
Oh, yeah,
But
of
I would
course.
say, every time you have a new CEO, even if it's from inside, I mean, you've got a new team, and the person has to adjust. And it usually takes months, right? I mean, we always talk about the first 90 days as important, but that's just the level setting. Sorry. After that, I mean, it
Mhm.
might take 6 months to a year until you've fully gone through a cycle of defined the strategy, solidified your team, gotten the operating model going. So I would say
Mhm.
it's not a short time. It's usually 6 to 12 months.
Um, when most search firms, maybe not just Egon Zehnder, place a CEO candidate, what percentage of the time does that CEO become successful? What's your sense of that?
I mean, I guess it's hard to measure, because we usually measure the first year, just because that's when we have a guarantee that if the person doesn't work out, we replace them. And then after that, it's hard to know now. So it's very rare that somebody gets fired within the first year, especially as a CEO. What we have been tracking is the value creation or the appreciation of share price over the life of a CEO. But then when we looked at it, it really depended also on the economic cycle, on the industry. So we've looked at all of those statistics, and we can cut it in any way to show how good we are. But it's really hard because there's so many uh, factors that go into determining the success of a CEO. But if I look back, it's more than 80% of the time we place a CEO that they stay in role for more than 3 to 4 years.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice. I mean, that's high compared
yeah,
to the general statistics of the, almost 50% having 3 CEOs over 10 years. So
yeah.
that's
But the other thing is it's harder to do with CEOs than with executive team members because we track all the executive placements we do, who gets promoted within what many years. But as a CEO, you can't get promoted. I mean, you're at the top job. So it's hard to measure, but
yeah.
we try to keep track. And yeah, I mean, more than 80% are
Mhm.
on the job after 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, so we can end off with a couple of comments that I think loop back right to your introduction of what we're looking for in CEOs today. So Lisa and Tom really talk about how, one, the CEO needs to be able to be with conflict and be able to be agile that way. And also, one of the things that I think is crucial is Lisa was saying, would you say CEOs have to have emotional regulation in order to manage the fight and the flight, et cetera? And Lisa, I'd say that is absolutely key. So tell me, so last question or last comment, what do you think is one of the most important things for us to leave with our coaches? So there they are, and it's a month from now, and they're talking to someone about CEO or CEO succession. What would you most like them to remember?
I mean, the importance and the impact you can have on an individual and on a company or on an industry.
Mhm.
And again, here I'm talking more about my own experience than that of my impact on clients, because it's hard to be objective there.
Mhm.
But there are situations where I've used people that coach me to really understand what I'm trying to do and the impact that it can have. And I've changed the message, I've changed the actions, I've changed the timing. And even though it's very slight sometimes, it makes a huge difference. So I think the impact coaches have on executives and therefore companies goes unnoticed, and it is by design. So I'm not saying make it more evident, because that's not your role or my role as a coach, but recognize that even though it's unnoticed, it is huge, and that should give you the self-confidence uh, to value and do more of the work you do. I mean, that would be my reflection here.
So I'll end with one comment about you, Herman, is that, as you've been describing the potential model, being good at curiosity, insight, engagement, determination, being agile. Oops, we lost you again, Herman. But so, guys, one thing I want to do is I've been observing Herman's leadership, and he practices what he preaches. I have to say that in your work with your teams, et cetera, you're asking questions and pulling for consensus in a way that I think embodies what we're talking about and what we're looking for in CEOs. So thank you for
Thank
walking
you.
and sharing your insights with us. So thank you. And
Thank
everybody,
you.
sorry for the tech issues. Take care.